Welcome, everybody, to the Bassfug Podcast. Today, we have a very special guest all the way from Los Angeles, California. I hope that's the correct Los Angeles. We're joined by Seth Cooper, a.k.a. Libythth. Welcome to the program, Seth.
Hello.
Totally appreciate your time in this Netflix world. Time is of the essence. So there's one thing I just want to jump into. It's a weird one. I wrote this down on my notepad.
Okay.
If I had a horse, I'd buy it oats and fuck it. This is from Roopsie Doopsie Flaw. Can you talk about this? It's on Upside Down Helicopter.
Yes. That track is okay. So that is Ernie Anderson, who is a TV announcer, and the show was America's Funniest Videos, and he was the announcer that would say like. Next, why some kids fall down, or
Yeah.
But, there was a bunch of outtakes of him where he was just melting down to the producer who was recording his voice lines, and that was the most hilarious line to me. If I had a horse.
Oh wow, I remember that show back in the day. That was like pre-Fail Army, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yes.
So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off on the story there. That stuck out for me
That's
for
the
some
end of the
reason.
story. I just thought it was a funny sample. It was just a funny drop. I just wanted to throw into a song.
Yeah, that was on a record label, Phthalo Records. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
It's phthalo.
Phthalo.
Like phthalo, and it's a color of paint. It's if you ever watch Bob Ross do a painting show,
It's been a while.
Phthalo blue and phthalo green. It's a chemical compound, phthalocyanine, and that is the name of the label, Phthalo Records.
Okay, so let's talk about Phthalo Records a bit, because you released a few articles on this label. How did you find a label to release your music?
Well, when I moved to Los Angeles in 2000, and I was just really trying to get on a label, I guess, and I didn't know how to do it, and the internet wasn't something I really knew how to use very well, and I just had an opportunity to sort of look up every record label in Los Angeles when I first moved here that might release some kind of odd electronic experimental music. And the only one that wrote me back was Phthalo. And I sent a tape in the mail, like the way you used to do back then. And Dmitry Forgadis, who's the guy who runs Phthalo Records, wrote me back and wanted to release 2 albums. And we met up and we ate chicken together, and me and Dmitry figured out how we were going to put stuff out, and he gave me a whole lot of CDs from his label, and it was a lot of really experimental computer music.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't sure if there was a delay or not. Experimental computer music. When you say experimental computer music, when I go through your discography, not all of it, but there's definitely, in my opinion, some. You probably heard this a million times, so sorry if this is cliche, but there's a bit of a Zappa element-esque to it. Sometimes I'm listening, and I'm not just saying the artist, I mean also, I forget the name of his label, but there's sort of some Captain Beefheart kind of mixed in. And some of your songs sound like they're from the Jazz from Hell era. I'm wondering if I'm kind of hitting the inspirations correctly, or is there something else?
Definitely Beefheart is a huge influence. I've always wondered what an electronic version of Trout Mask Replica would sound like.
Yeah.
Just a completely deconstructed version of I mean, Beefheart would deconstruct rock music, and Zappa too. And I wondered what an electronic version of that would sound like a lot of times.
Yeah, it's funny because we call it experimental music or experimental electronic music, but I think if you know sort of where people are coming from, to someone off the street, if they listen to Upside Down Helicopter, they might be like, "Oof, this isn't Kesha. This isn't right." But I think if you're able to recognize sort of what you're referencing, or sort of where you're coming from, you see like a lot of methodical attributes to the music. Is that true, or is it just completely random for you?
Oh no, it's never random. Nothing's ever random. I mean, everything is every influence I've ever had sort of put in a blender. If you're talking about Upside Down Helicopter, that was me just putting everything I'd ever heard into a record. Like,
You want to elaborate?
Well, God, where do I even start? I mean, I think that when I was making that record, I was really trying to attract the kind of audience that liked breakcore. But without actually doing that, I wasn't trying to copy anything, just completely make something different that took every influence I've ever had and put it together. The Residents was a band I was really influenced by. Do you ever listen to The Residents?
A little bit, but not a lot.
Kind of in the same era of Beefheart and Zappa, but a more sort of distilled into the sort of alien music sounding thing.
Is that the guy, Wildman Fisher, the merry-go-round guy? Is
No. No, the Residents were the guys that wore eyeball heads with top hats on, and they just did sort of just strange alien music.
Alien music. Let's move on to our mutual buddy, Paul. Let's talk about Paul Paranerd. He is the first guest that we've ever interviewed on the Bassfug podcast. And we did a second interview, but I haven't released it yet. I'm curious, what's the relationship between you and Paul, and how does Paul know about you, and vice versa?
I think Paul and I met on the Planet Mu soundboard. I mean, the forum message board back in the day.
I remember. Hard Off hates me.
Why does Hard Off hate you?
I think because I was just an annoying kid. I was more of an Xceltronic Aphex Twin NU guy, but I would go over on the Planet Mu message board from time to time. Sorry, so that's where you folks met.
Yeah, I think and I definitely remember your name from there, and I think that do you remember when we used to do quick shots? Do you remember that?
No, not at all.
Quick shots was sort of a ritual they did on that message board where one person would make a 90-second track, and then you uploaded it to an email server somewhere, and then the next person took that and mixed it into another 90 seconds, and we ended up making all these long mixes. I thought you were doing that too. That's how I met Paul, I think.
Okay. Yeah, because he was a Planet Mu guy for sure.
Yeah. And all that just sort of eventually went away, the world of forums.
Yeah, it's strange now. Like, now there's more community than there was before. I feel like the Soulseek, the Xceltronics, the Planet Muse, the We Are the Music Makers, I feel like that is just expanded so greatly now that it's like millions of people are sort of talking about the same shit that we were talking about back then. And now I'm seeing a lot of bass music producers doing more avant-garde stuff instead of trying to copy, Tiesto or whatever, Steve Aoki. They're trying to copy Venetian snares or Aphex Twin. And I don't mean copy, but you know what I mean. Like they're discovering another spectrum of music because of these Reddit, Facebook groups, Discord. A lot of people are on Discord now. I'm wondering if you notice the sort of same thing now, or if you think it's completely different.
I honestly don't know, because I have pretty much retreated into just I don't talk to anybody online about music anymore. It's just sort of, I just do my own thing now, and I don't engage with people that way. I think I just sort of had one little community that I liked for a little while, and then one day they just flipped the switch and turned it off, and that was it. But I kept in touch with people like Paul, and he actually got me to to come to Moncton to play.
Really? Really?
Yeah. Oh, you didn't know about that? Yeah. Oh, that is the biggest thing with me and Paul is he reached out to me, and he was part of planning a music festival called Reflux out there.
I played at the first one.
Music and digital art, and you know about that?
Yes. No, continue. Kim, tell me the story.
It was 2015. He told me that they had a budget and they could fly me out, and I was so excited. I brought my equipment. I did this. The live set that I used to do involved me playing an electronic drum pad called a drum cat. It's a little MIDI controller that's rubber pads, and I'm a drummer. That's how I got started in music. I've been a drummer since I was probably like 12 years old. When I just had the nervous energy of just tapping on things all the time. And I played the drums, and I incorporated that into the music I was doing just through MIDI, and that was my live set. So the stuff that was like Upside Down Helicopter, but this other album called The Garbage Does Not Feel It Is Unclean and the Flower Does Not Know It Is Fragrant. That is an album I did, which I performed the entire thing at this show in Moncton, and it was really fun. I got to hang out with Paul and come to Canada. It was great.
Was that your first Canadian experience, Moncton?
Not my first. No, you know what? I was in Moncton as a child with my family. We went on a road trip. I've been there before.
Wow. Yeah. So you went to Magnetic Hill.
I don't know what was that. I remember
it's the thing that goes backwards.
The water that goes backwards, right?
Yeah, that's the one. Sorry. You remember a channel?
Something like that. It was something to do with the tidal bore, right? The Moncton feature.
Yes. Yeah. Oh wow.
And I wish I'd gotten to stay there and hang out longer, but it was just sort of a whirlwind trip where I went to Moncton.
You probably got you got the juice out of that orange. It's funny because for Paul and I in the early 2000s, Planet Mu and for me Xeltronic, these were an escape. Because, that was, you've been there. Imagine that place without broadband internet. It was for people, you know what I mean? It was rough. So to be able to go on IRC or these chat programs and talk to people in bigger cities and learn about different types of music and stuff was a godsend. Holy fuck. Like you wouldn't believe. So it's kind of go full circle about through the Planet Mu stuff. I didn't know they just turned it off though. But I guess at some point they stopped doing the breakcore thing and they just started to capitalize on dubstep.
It ended up being like dubstep, but then once Mike Paradinas just decided to let go of that website, it became Braindance website. It was the Braindance forum, which is another thing for another couple more years. The Planet Mu forum just sort of kept going.
Oh, wow.
Under new management for a little while. And I think they just got tired of it because it was just like 8 dudes that were sort of hanging on to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Xeltronic is still there today.
I've noticed that. And I actually have an account there. I never used to post there, but I could if I wanted to.
Phobia Zero. I don't know what he did.
I don't know those guys. I don't know that.
Well, that's where Joyrex started. The guy who started We Are the Music Makers. I'm not sure if you remember that.
I remember that guy.
Yeah, he used to post on apexswing.nu in the beginning. But it's crazy. I think I look back at those times really fondly because I don't think this podcast, we've had a few people on, and I try to document it as much as possible. Soulseek, I'm not sure if you use that a lot. You probably did.
I never did, actually.
Really?
I never figured out how to use I never got into that.
Wow.
Maybe now's the time. Maybe 2021 is when I get into Soulseek.
Yeah, I think it's still up. But that was because we had cool record stores in Moncton, but thankfully, it was, if I wanted a Autech or CD or Boards of Canada, I had to go to HMV in Toronto and pick it up for $40 a fucking CD or something. And so Soulseek was sort of the place where you got esoteric music from. But now it's so much different. I guess like you said, you wouldn't know because you aren't really following it. But nowadays, sort of take my word for it, all those groups are alive and well, but just in their own sort of subcultures. People that you wouldn't expect have these now. We interview so many people where I talk about, oh, how do you grow your brand? Like, how do you get out there? How do you get your music out there? And they're all like, oh yeah, I have a Discord. We all chill on my Discord and play video games. The online community is evolved, but it's totally the same. It's really something. We were the first. We were some of the first people, I think, to sort of pioneer.
I think so, yeah.
But let's move on. Let's talk about. I have a lot of things I want to ask you about. You've been making music for 27 years.
Yeah.
Let's start from the beginning. Let's talk about your first music memories, how you got into music, and then how you got to the Planet Mu message board.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I just have always liked sound. I've always liked music. I've always liked rhythm. Rhythm has always been really important. I think, like I was mentioning before, I had a lot of nervous energy as a kid where I would tap on things all the time. I would always like hit things with my hands and make rhythms and stuff. And at some point, I think my parents just talked me into taking drum lessons at the local music store. And I started taking drum lessons, but because they were running the music lessons out of the back of a music store, they couldn't have a live drum kit. So, and I'm talking about, this is like 1986 or something. And he had a Simmons drum kit that was this electronic MIDI based music drum kit, the kind with that you'd see in a music video in the 80s with like hexagonal shaped drum pads.
Nice.
You know? Yeah. So I learned how to play drums on one of those, and I remember thinking, this is kind of lame, but learning how to play that, I realized, and my teacher would be able to like flip a switch on this thing and turn knobs and change the drum kit, and I was fascinated by that. And the idea that drums could be electronic was so cool to me. But just learning to play was also important, and I picked up drums. But I always sort of had this feeling that I should know about like what keyboards do, what electronic instruments do, and learning about MIDI was interesting.
Seth, I have to interrupt. Yes. This is the first time in my history where my DAW froze.
Oh no.
Oh man.
Oh crap.
Yeah.
Did you lose
it's still recording. 1 second.
Oh.
Okay, so we were at the hexagon drums.
Hexagon shaped drums.
Yeah.
They were MIDI drums.
Were your parents musical?
Not really, no. They're both artistic people, but music was just something I was always kind of alone with, I guess. Like I didn't really like music education at school. It always sort of turned me off because it was just a lot of kind of singing dumb songs and tooting on a recorder, you know, but I just had this urge to make music, and there was always music in my head, and I liked the idea of playing an instrument and, you know, just to make the sound that it makes. I didn't care if I knew how to play it or not. I just like, hand me that instrument. I just want to try it, you know?
Yeah. I was the same way. It's funny because you're talking about music training was kind of lame because you just toot on a horn or something. When I tried to join the school band, and I just lied my way into playing the drums. I said, oh yeah, I've been playing for 2 years. I just don't know how to read sheet music. And that's how I got on the drums, because I drum too. I'm wondering, do you think that the percussion helped speed up the music making process, because you sort of have this fundamental of like of rhythm?
Yeah, rhythm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you can play drums, if you can get a grasp of rhythm, you can figure any other instrument out, any other sort of expression of music.
Totally.
I know there is music that has no rhythm at all. You know, that's possible, but I don't know. For me, it's always about some kind of rhythm or repetitive pattern.
How did you start making electronic music then? So you started playing drums, but at some point someone had to show you how to do it, and I presume that this was early in the 90s when this happened. Am I correct?
Yeah, early in the 90s, I just would get my hands on a keyboard. A keyboard would just be it was like an electronic piano, and it would have, you know, a bunch of regular MIDI sounds and different instruments.
Yeah.
But I had this one, I think it was Roland made it, but it had this feature where you could change it to where some of the black keys on the keyboard were flatted a quarter step. Like it was like this weird sort of detuning you could do to play various things, like, sort of Arabic music or something, or Turkish or something. And I remember being fascinated by that you could have like a different tuning than just the regular keyboard layout. And that was one thing, just that music could be sort of off kilter and out of tune to someone's ears. But the keyboard I ended up getting, because I had an insurance claim after I was robbed in college. I had a break-in happen. Somebody came in and took that keyboard and a drum machine that I had and all of my entire
drum machine?
CD collection. It was a Roland R8.
Oh, wow.
You know of those?
Yeah, classic.
It was pretty cool. It was not quite like it didn't do any sampling. It wasn't like an MPC, but it was sort of laid out like that. It had 16 little pads, and you could program the beats, and it had like a bunch of different outputs, and you could do cool stuff with it. And I didn't have it for that long. I saved up money and bought that thing, and then someone broke in. But I had, at the time, because I was in college, I ended up getting an insurance claim, and with that money, I bought the Ensoniq TS12, which was like just a massive synthesizer of the time. And that thing just turned out to be a complete inspiration for all the music I've made since, pretty much.
I think you made an entire album using that. Is that correct?
I made like more than that. Yeah. Like,
do you still have it?
I still have it, and it stopped working at a certain point. But
that sucks.
A couple of years ago, and I tried to get it fixed, and they said it would. The guy gave me the idea. He said, "You know what? For less than what it would cost me to fix this, you could go on eBay and get another one."
Oh wow!
And that's what I did. I got another. Just went on eBay and got one.
That's
awesome.
I
have two of them now. But this thing, I'd like to talk about it because.
Let's do it.
Okay.
I'm going to Google it because I'm not familiar with it.
Well, there was the TS10 and the TS12. The TS10 was like the smaller version, but this was a full-size 78 keyboard with weighted keys like a piano. And it was the kind of thing you'd play like new age music on. But if you went deeper into the settings of this thing,
I'm looking at it right now. It looks like those Yamaha TX77, SY77s, like kind of
workstation
things.
It was that caliber of thing. It was a big workstation, with a floppy disk drive, and you could save. It did sequencing, and it was mostly sampled instruments. Just regular instruments, whatever. But you could. This is where I figured out you could detune things, you could layer things, you could just make the weirdest damn sounds, and you could also had pitch tables, which were, settings for the keyboard where it was intonated differently than the 12-step setting. You could have like microtonal settings or sort of different various ethnic settings.
Sorry, did you say it could sample too, or?
No, it didn't do sampling,
okay.
But I think there was another version. There was an ASR, I think ASR 10 was like the sampler, but you could load samples from their library and use samples, but it didn't do any sampling.
So this is what you were using mostly for everything, or is that what you're using now still?
I have it as just sort of an element, a thing I can play and add to things, because what I do now is more of a just blend of everything. But back then, when I was first getting going, I would just use only this keyboard. It was all I needed. It was just, it did every sound. And you could program it to just do sequences and, kind of string songs together without any like visual representation. It was just all, sequencing on a keyboard. And I just set out to make just strange music with it.
That's awesome. It must have been really expensive though, but I guess you got it from the claim.
I got an insurance claim because I was still, my parents had insurance on me, I guess.
That's awesome because, you tell this story and someone who's in their 20s who listens to this podcast is like, oh yeah, so he got a keyboard. But I don't think people realize that you couldn't just, get a keyboard. They were all like $2,000.
Yeah, it was around that. Yeah, it was insane.
And there was no DAW.
no DAW. Yeah, there was. It had nothing to do with the computer. It was just everything had to be in this one thing, and it weighed like 100 pounds. It was this heavy ass thing.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know?
I had an SY-77, and like moving that thing sucked. It was like 120 pounds or something like that.
Yeah. I used to carry it to gigs and whatever.
Can we talk about sort of the evolution of music production and just kind of get more into the nerdy details about things? You said you wanted to talk about the TS12. Let's talk about like gear. Let's talk about how it's evolved and what you're using now. For me, like with Paul was using Buzz Tracker from what I remember. I was more Fast Tracker too. And it wasn't because I was an elitist or something. It was because I didn't have fucking $2,000 to buy equipment, and it was 1996, and I wanted to make music. So all I had was a floppy disk, and someone else in town had the program and copied it, and then it ended up being on a family computer. Nowadays, if you say, I want to start making music, you could pirate enough software to recreate the Lord of the Rings soundtrack if you wanted to with enough YouTube tutorials. It's insane. There weren't any YouTube tutorials, and you had to read these manuals that looked like IBM punch card.
Yeah, you had to just figure out. You had to just figure it out and figure out what you even wanted to do with what the thing you had does, you know.
And forget recording onto Audacity or something. You had a cassette tape. You had to get a 4-track if you were lucky. So can we talk about
having a DAT was a really big deal when I was like borrowed a DAT. I could use a DAT and record.
So let's talk about the beginnings, what you were using, the limitations, what you liked about it, and then let's move on to like kind of progress into where we are now.
Well, where are we starting with TS12 and how I used to record that? Because that was just direct onto a tape. It was just, I would record onto tape. But I did, around 2002, I got into using Reason. I just wanted to get into software more than just a big keyboard, because I feel like I used that thing for almost a decade and had gotten everything I wanted to get out of it. And it always was showing me new things to do with it, like figuring out with the TS12, I could hook it up to the MIDI keyboard. I mean, the MIDI drum pad I was talking about, and I could run a sequence where it would play a loop until I hit a foot switch, and then it would go on to the next loop, and I could set it up. I could set up a song where I could do a live performance where I played the drums along with the song that I was doing, but I was progressing it with just a foot switch.
Oh, that's cool.
You know, and keeping it going. And I even had like a thing that was an infrared sensor. It was called a Air Effects. I think Alesis made it. Alesis Air Effects, and it was just like a thing. There was an infrared sensor where it was almost like a theremin. You could move your hand near it. But
Roland had those.
My head. I used to, There were a bunch of different ones, but I'd put it on a microphone stand and I'd move my head along with playing, and it would go whoosh, whoosh, it would do a phase effect or something if I moved my head near it.
So what else? What else you
after that? I got into using Reason. Reason became my DAW that I was into. And I made everything in Reason. All the stuff from Upside Down Helicopter is Reason. And I completely stopped using a giant keyboard and went into... I liked being able to have a thing where it was stable, where everything was always... Every time I opened it up, it would be the same thing. Like, there was a lot of, back then, like, cracked plugins and things that wouldn't always work, and you'd try it. You know, you'd make a song, and then you'd open it up again, and it wouldn't do anything you thought it was going to do. And you'd lose stuff. And the thing I liked about Reason was it was really stable and self-contained, and within limitations, it was a pretty good program for stuff.
And it was easy to get a hold of too, like a legitimate copy. They would give copies of that away, like if you bought like a MIDI keyboard or something. I remember I got like some light version of it with something. I bought a sound card or something. Are you still using Reason to this day? I don't even know if that exists anymore, doesn't it?
It does. There's still. I don't anymore. I haven't used it for a while, but because I've moved into using iOS apps. I just use my iPad to make music now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, everything I do is an app, and I play guitar. I just started playing guitar probably 5 years ago.
We could talk about the guitar, but can we talk about some of the apps? Because I heard that with I heard with iOS, I forget what it's called, but there was like a certification that they had for like hardware, but then they dropped it with like one of the newer versions of iOS. So like a bunch of hardware that syncs with like iPads and stuff doesn't work anymore. I heard for compatibility, Apple will dump a lot of the users sometimes, but I heard that the ecosystem of sound creation apps is amazing on
It's
iOS.
fun. Yeah. I mean, I don't actually use any hardware with it. I just do everything just on the touch screen pretty much. Except for when I'm recording an instrument into it.
Is it your phone or are you using an iPad?
I use an iPad.
Which one?
Yeah. It's regular. It's not iPad Pro. It's just iPad. I've had it since 2018. I actually don't know which version it is.
That's the one. That's the one sphere of this that I have zero clue. I don't know anything about Mac OS. I don't know anything about Apple products.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry, but so
it's an iPad.
Sure.
They're all kind of the same.
Okay.
There's a Pro version that's way more expensive. I never buy that one.
Okay.
But I've had this iPad since 2018, and I actually the first music I made with apps was on my phone, and I got this app called Nano Studio.
Okay.
Which was, I'm going to go back to probably like 2011, where there was this app that was like a mini little DAW, that you could do on your phone. And I could just sort of sit there on the couch and make a song. And I made an album. There's an album on my Bandcamp, Sleeping Through the Beeping, was made entirely on an iPhone.
Oh, wow.
It has a little piano roll track, and you can sample with it. And I don't know if you listen to that one, but
that's incredible. Yeah, because for me, when I hear about making music on your phone, it's such a far cry from figuring out what your IRQ port was on your fucking Windows 95 DOS machine, so that you could get your sound card to work.
It's just a little self-contained environment that worked for me for making songs. I could do the kind of arrangements I wanted to do, and bend the notes the way I wanted to, sample if I wanted to. The drums sound trashy and kind of good,
Huh. Do you think that's sort of the future? Do you think everyone's just going to move towards iPads? Because I was thinking of buying an iPad because of Procreate and the pencil. It's like this drawing program or something. It looks really awesome.
Oh, yeah.
But
I got a pencil recently, too. I like the pencil.
They seem expensive. Like, I don't know. The iPads, it's like $1,000. I'm not sure if it's because I'm an Android guy, but it's not. I don't have any brand allegiance. I just never gave a shit. It was just like my boomer in me. I'm just like, I want the nice camera.
Yeah. No, I wasn't. I didn't pay $1,000 for mine. It was a few years ago. I think it might have been like $500.
Oh, that's cool. So what are some other programs you use on it, and how are you getting the sounds out? Like how? Because I'm trying to picture, and all I'm imagining is they don't even have a headphone jack on them now, do they? Or
no, you get a little adapter. You have to get little adapters, and they call it the camera adapter. It's like a little USB dealie that you stick in there, and you can plug in an interface. But also, I just they have here's an adapter. You can hook up regular headphones to it.
Okay, that's cool. So how are you mastering that? Are you going direct like into something, or you just?
I have a DAW. It's Cubasis is what it's called. I guess based on Cubase, but it's Cubasis 2 is what I'm using. There's a 3 now. Mm-hmm. But you can use plugins. You can just put different synths in there and different samplers, and you can edit audio. It's just like a little mini DAW inside of apps.
Oh, wow. So you don't even need to line it out into a mixer. You render.
You can. Yeah, using an adapter, there's interfaces you can get. In fact, they make really fancy ones that are like, 8 inputs, 8 outputs and stuff.
Wow.
You can really mix and do all kinds of stuff in it.
Huh? Because personally, I've been going DAWless lately. Because at some point, I hit sort of a point in my own music production journey where I was just like, I put too much time into this, and it's kind of draining me. You sit in front of a computer for 9 hours a day, if it's not crunch time, and then you go home, and then what do? You sit in front of a computer for another 8 hours to decompress.
That's why I got into guitar. I think it's just doing something physical, and I work sitting in front of a computer. That's my job, and at the end of the day, I still want to make music, but I don't want to sit and spend another 4, 5, 6 hours looking at my screen anymore, like,
Mm.
but something about being able to just go into a different room and have the iPad just be mobile. It's just, I can go and sit outside and do it if I want.
So the iPad doesn't have the same vibe as sitting in front of a computer.
Not necessarily. Yeah. I mean, you can sit anywhere. You're still sitting, but
because I was thinking about it for the DAW-lessness, and it's weird because this will bring to another tone of the conversation. Going away from the DAWs, and then you're going DAW-less, more or less. It's, I don't know what it is. Before I would laugh at people. I'd be like, that's it's all in your head. But when you try it, it's really, you start to enjoy music again. And I'm not sure about you, but I think we've been producing for maybe you a little bit longer than I have. I've been producing since 1996, I think. And I really, when I got rid of the computer, I really started to fall in love with making music again. I'm wondering if you had sort of that kind of epiphany and then decided to add guitar, decided to go with
Definitely.
the iPad. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, guitar is just something, I've always loved the sound of a guitar. I've always loved guitars. I've always loved holding a guitar, but I always sucked at guitar. Like, it was always just, and it's sort of the antithesis of what electronic music ended up being. You got to just throw away guitars and rock, and it's just, that's some other thing. But I think figuring out a way to just incorporate that into the idea of electronic music and just putting it together and actually physically playing a thing and holding the thing in your hand, as opposed to just thinking and looking at little blocks on a screen and moving Legos around and, pushing squares, as they say.
Yeah. So you started playing guitar and you started using the iPad, but did you ditch the rest of your gear, or is that sort of just exactly what you're doing now?
Well, I never ditch anything. It's still sitting around. It's I have all the stuff. Yeah, no, I still have the TS12. I mean, sometimes I'll just pick it up and start making sounds with it, just playing. I haven't been recording a lot lately. I've just sort of, it's more like a meditative thing where it's not for anybody. I'm just playing,
Yeah, that's
being stuck at home. I mean, like, we could talk about being just
COVID,
having spent the last goddamn year just in my house, I don't go anywhere.
Let's do it. I got it written down here. Every guest I usually ask in the beginning, but we had so many other questions to ask. Let's talk about how playing live is affected. Let's talk about COVID. Let's talk about how you've been dealing with the pandemic as an artist.
Oh, well, I've sort of phased out playing live kind of naturally anyway. It became harder to prepare and really put on a show for like one person, like no one's there. The last big live thing I did was a DJ event, and I went to Amsterdam with Dimitri from Phthalo Records. Got a bunch of people to come out and do this festival thing, so I made some techno music. I made an attempt to make just techno, just something you could dance to, and I played at this festival thing, and that was the first music I really got into making on the iPad, and trying to figure out how to just make dance music, because that's something I never really did. But that was the last live thing I did. I'm getting off track, but
no, that's fine.
Yeah, just being home has been just, I think about just playing music for its own sake more often, more than like, here, I'm going to try to make this album and try to put something out and I'm going to figure out how I'm going to play this live. Like, I have no idea how I would play a live show at this point, because what I do is just a patchwork. I'll record some loops and things and add stuff to it, and I don't know how I would do it live. So I guess it hasn't affected me in that way, because I don't know. Playing live is a different thing to me than it used to be.
So let's talk about the pandemic. How is that affecting you as an artist then? Even though you sort of slowed down on playing live, how is that playing its toll on you?
It's been hard. I mean, it has been difficult. And I think, like I said, music becomes a meditation. It just becomes a thing to make me sane, I'm not really thinking of it as a product I'm going to finish. It's just a process. It's like medicine.
Well, if you weren't playing live, what is it about the pandemic that's driving you insane? Is it?
I think it's just missing out on life, just missing out on, you know, like being able to go to a show. I'd love to go see some music.
It
Can't
feels
do that anymore. It's like
it feels a little bit caged. It's like, yeah, sure, it's in some ways it's fun and it's great, but then sometimes you get that glimmer of like lost humanity. That's just like, it reminds
you
you.
just have a memory of like, remember when we used to just like get in a big sweaty pit in a little room and like stay up all night and.
Or remember when your favorite restaurants weren't going out of business because everything's just being transferred over to Jeff Bezos.
No, I have like music stuff delivered to the house. Like if I want like some cables or something. I loved going to Guitar Center. I used to love to just go there and like look at stuff and touch things. And like now it's just such a bummer to go anywhere. Like I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird because now
I feel bad for people who really do have, their life revolves around touring and playing lots of shows and stuff. For me, playing a show was a thing I did maybe once, twice, 3 times a year. If I was lucky, something cool would happen. But I know there's people that are really suffering from having to not do it.
Yeah.
And not even get to play with other people. Music for me has always been a solo thing. Like I just do it, it's just me, but I understand how that's a lot of people's life. It's, revolves around music.
Yeah, I totally, it's hard for everybody. Let's talk about, maybe we could switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about being original. There's something that I noticed in your music that's you're very nonconformist in your sound. A lot of it is very original. And I'm just wondering, is that something that you learn or is that something that you're taught? I know now a little bit more about your history, so I could kind of get an idea of how that sort of came to be. But I'm wondering for the younger audience out there that is just sort of following trends and sort of painting by numbers, what can you say? What advice can you give to that person to think outside of the box and start to not be afraid of exploring the experimental?
I don't know. I think for me, there's always just been something in my head that I don't hear coming out of mainstream things. I think that, I've always just tried to, I see what other people are doing and I'm like, I'm going to try something different. That's always sort of been my instinct. I'm going to do something that is surprising. Cause like my favorite music is stuff is surprising and odd and different, but that's going to marginalize you if you're a young person starting out. That's if you're just doing stuff that's strange. I think that stuff that catches people's attention is different. Like sorry, I'm a little tongue-tied.
No. I understand what you're saying. It's something now. It's hard because when you're 20 and you're trying to, there's a bit of conformity there. You're getting out of high school and you're used to that. Yeah.
When I was first starting making music, like trying to figure out who was making electronic music and, it's just who's doing this stuff, who's trying to figure out how to use a drum machine and stuff. And it was always, everything you would hear would just be the same sort of thing. Like it was a lot of times, I think, like based on fashion and stuff, just like what clothes you were wearing, what kind of scene you were into. And I always thought that music ought to be something that transcends that and is something that's its own thing just for the sake of sound, And
expression. Like when you're talking about Anybody that's listening to this podcast is getting real sick of me saying this thing that I always say, but there's this book by a guy named R.D. Laing, not the guy from Howard Stern, but a Scottish psychologist. He wrote this book called The Politics of Experience, and he says, you experience yourself through the work that you do because ontologically speaking, or whatever you want to say, you can't experience, Seth Cooper cannot experience Seth Cooper. You don't know what it's like to be with you because you are you. So when you start putting the pen to the paper, you're seeing a reflection of yourself, and you're able to sort of gaze at yourself from the outside through interpretation of what you're creating. Now, this isn't that kind of podcast. It can be. It doesn't matter, right? But smoke them if you got them, Joe Rogan. But look, I get it. You start making music for yourself, and not for trying to be the next Aphex Twin. And for myself, I know my dreams when I was younger was I wanted to be Trent Reznor so bad, and like just was like, yeah, I'm gonna be the next Trent Reznor, I'm gonna be the next Marilyn Manson or whatever, right? but you get into it because of the fashion, exactly what you're saying. But then when you get older and you sort of get more mature, and you start looking at it, you have your career, and you have your stuff, and you have your successes and failures, and you look at music and you sort of realize, oh, this is just like a diary. This is just a journal for me. And I'm sure when you look at your Bandcamp and you see all your albums, you could pinpoint, oh, I was living in that apartment, and then I remember when this thing happened. And it becomes so much more fulfilling than having a 5-year
You've made a soundtrack for your life. You've made an actual like original motion picture soundtrack of your own life. And it might sound like weird honking synthesizers, but that's your soundtrack, you know?
Exactly.
You made that like every day of your life you were thinking about it, you know?
Exactly.
I always think about it. I never stop thinking about it, even when I'm not recording anything or making anything. It's always sort of on my mind. Like, what is this musical identity I want to show people, or even just show myself? Like, just being impressed by yourself's ability to just make sounds that are entertaining to you, you know?
Yeah. And also it is that time capsule too. It's like, I'm sure there was gear you got rid of, and then you go back and listen to a song and you're like, oh, I remember that. And sure, I don't want to keep, I should have kept it, but at the same time, maybe it's for the best. It's kind of, it's spiritual. I don't usually say that, but, so I talked about non-conforming. We talked about the DAWs. Maybe we could touch on some sound design tips for the younger crowd, the people that are trying to find a way to stick out. Earlier question was talking about sort of the essence of it, but how about being pedantic and talking about exactly sounds to stand out? If there was a 20-year-old dubstep DJ who said, Seth, I'm making the stuff, it's okay, but I need to stand out, what do I put in my next song? What would you answer, Seth?
I'd say don't make dubstep, first of all.
Okay. Disavow. There's a lot of dubstep producers that come on. Disavow. Okay, yes.
I think it's just finding that sound that you like. Like, don't try to go, I want that thing that goes and it has to sound exactly like this other thing that I like and got really into. But just experiment with it. Just tweak it, turn all the little knobs, figure out what it does, and if it actually makes you feel anything, rather than just, this is correct, this is what it's supposed to sound like. Does it make you feel something? Does it make you laugh? I mean, sometimes a thing can just be funny and you just think it's cool and you want to hear it over and over and over again.
Yeah. No, I totally agree, especially with turning all the knobs. When you get gear, you could either read a 200-page manual, or you could just hit the record button, screw around with all the knobs, go through all the LED.
Yeah, and then when you get stuck, then you get the manual. And then you get the manual out when you're like, okay, now how do I actually do this, and what does it mean? You know, you can twist all the knobs you want, but
yeah, there's an expression in the software development community. It's hack to learn, don't learn to hack.
Yeah.
So we're getting towards the end of the interview, Seth. Once again, I totally appreciate your time. I have a couple more questions I want to ask you, if that's all right.
Sure.
Let's talk about 27 years of music making. How would you say everything's changed? I guess we kind of touched on it, but in retrospect, how do you feel about it, and what do you think about the landscape?
Well, good question. I think that it's definitely way more accessible to everyone. Anybody who wants to make music, but I think that music is so tied to, in a lot of people's mind, like an image and stardom and just even sort of social media fame in a small group. I don't think it was necessarily like that 27 years ago. It was more just like trying to get people to hear you, trying to get other people to know about you. Yeah. I don't know. My own SoundCloud page has sort of become a wasteland, like a graveyard, because I'm kind of just overwhelmed. When SoundCloud first started, because I'm just thinking about SoundCloud, that's the thing that's popped into my head and how that's changed in the last couple of years. When I was first on it, God, I feel like I've been on SoundCloud for like 12 years or something, and people used to actually contact me and go, "This is cool, I like this," and would share stuff, and you would actually have interactions with people. But now I feel like there's so much bot activity where everything feels like it's automated, and it's all about trying. It has nothing to do with music. It's just like getting numbers happening and things.
No, I agree with you 100% on that. Yeah, there is a lot of bot activity and automation going on, and for better or for worse. And I hear you. I do believe that, in my opinion, I think in 2003, 2005, whatever, there was the same sort of clout chasing. I think there was, especially in the breakcore scene. I'm not sure how familiar you are with it. Probably a lot if you're on Planet Mu.
I was a lurker of that, I suppose.
Yeah,
I never really I don't ever think anything I ever did could really qualify as breakcore, but I definitely followed that world a little bit.
Well, there was definitely a time when people were trying to be the next Venetian Snares. And there was a lot of people just trying to become internet famous. So I
think Venetian Snares is probably the first artist I ever found out about first from the internet.
Oh, really?
Like it wasn't the first artist I didn't like read about in a magazine or see the disc in the store, and it was just strictly something I heard about from the internet, and the way people were talking about this guy was like, holy crap, this is the craziest stuff that's ever happened. And I just kind of tracked it down that way.
Oh yeah, for sure. I remember Paul was the first person to show me Venetian Snares. Actually, I remember he showed me Finding Cadence, or it was the one with
Finding Candace.
Sorry, I'm horrible with pronunciations. The JonBenet Ramsey quotes on it. That was the one with Trevor Brown's. Like they're very controversial records. I remember listening to those and being like, oh, that distorted Amen sound was something that was familiar because of Atari Teenage Riot, but you heard about that because of the Spawn soundtrack and it was on Much Music or MTV or what have you. So I remember that era, but with the clout chasing, there was all these people were trying to be the next him. And I remember for me, I don't know if it was because of the Moncton upbringing, but in Moncton, it was so punk rock, and everyone was just like, fuck you. Like, everyone was just like, fuck you to everybody, even your friends. And a good thing, not in a negative way. And so I remember really trying to stand out, sure, being inspired by a certain particular sound, but I never wanted to be like anybody else. I just wanted to be me and be as much as me as I possibly could be. And I think on some of these net labels, you saw there were other people that were like that as well, though. So it wasn't all clout chasing. There was a lot of originality going on. There was, especially on those forums, you know.
I think there was a lot of like humor in it sometimes that
oh, for sure,
maybe doesn't come across on a first listen to things like that. But I think the idea of just putting stuff in a weird blender, just sounds and samples and drum breaks, and just trying to be as sort of chaotic with it as possible was interesting to me. It was an antisocial, like a kind of a punk stance to take.
for sure.
toward music.
You had Planet Mu favorites, like I think was Bit Meddler on Planet Mu, or was that someone else? I don't remember.
Yeah, that was a name I remember, but Phthalocyanine, like I mentioned before, from Phthalo Records, was an artist on Planet Mu. That was some very, just really interesting, very freeform, almost just like sort of freeform electronica that was interesting.
Yeah.
I think the album was called I can't remember it. It was called like 25 tracks for something. What the heck was it called? 25 tracks for one track, I think it was called, by Phthalocyanine. was just like this very abstract drum machine music with just sounds going all over the place, and it was the kind of stuff I was inspired by, I guess.
Yeah. And now thinking about it, there was a lot of pressure to conform during the 2000s. This is the boy band era, Britney Spears. And there was, I guess, Darude, Sandstorm, stuff like that. So to have people making this experimental electronic music, that was definitely a treat. That was the retreat. The internet
it was
forums.
A way you could actually completely ignore the things going on in the larger world of pop music for the first time. I think there was enough sort of community with the kind of stuff we were into where you didn't even have to know what was going on.
Totally.
And I think maybe, like, to answer your earlier question, that's definitely a thing where you don't have to know anything about. There's no like one sort of unifying music culture thing at all. It's compartmentalized, I guess, where you could come up completely isolated from lots of different things.
Oh yeah, for sure. Good times. Lots of good acts. I think Church of '09 was that on Planet Mu, or was that Schematic?
Church of '09. I don't know. I don't remember that one.
There was
some of these names sort of like are distant memories.
I remember listening to a lot of Otto von Schirach, a lot of Church of '09, a lot of Bit Meddler, a lot of Bogdan Rosinski, V Snares, yeah. DMX Crew. All the Aphex Twin stuff.
I liked Bogdan a lot. I was definitely a big fan of the just sort of the melodic, sort of playful, fun melodies kind of stuff that wasn't such industrial menace. You know, it was like it was fun. Like I like doing stuff that's fun, you know, for music, and just maybe even silly. And I think that's off-putting to people because they want their music to be very serious, you know.
Does humor belong in music?
Yeah, totally.
Seth, thank you so much for your time. I totally appreciate it. Where can people find you online? Do you want to list your socials?
Bandcamp is pretty much it right now. That's where all my albums are. Libythth, Libythth.
Okay, on bandcamp.com. Instagram, I get no Instagram, I'm gonna guess.
I don't have a Libythth Instagram. I keep it simple. You can find me on Bandcamp. All my stuff is there.
All right, and I'm happy to say this is recorded successfully. So I'm gonna.
Oh, good. And you sound great.
Okay, excellent. I end the recording now. Okay, bye everybody. Bye.
Good night.
This program was brought to you by the superwill64.com Entertainment Network. For more great shows, podcasts, and music, please visit superwill64.com.